What have those naughty gods been up to? Most of us, when we read the Greek myths, don't get particularly upset if we read about the gods doing naughty things. We kind of take it for granted that if Zeus sees an attractive girl or boy, he's going to have his way with him or her, as long as he can evade the jealous eye of Hera, at least. We're not particularly disturbed when Zeus decides to wipe out the human race because humanity had become corrupt, wicked, and irreverent toward the gods. He decided to cleanse the earth of humanity's sins with a mighty flood. First of all, and most obviously, we don't believe in Zeus, so we have no reason to think that this story is true. It's just a myth, right? But digging a little more deeply, it's not just that we don't believe in Zeus, we don't worship him. We don't believe in him in the sense that we might say to someone we trust and value deeply, "I believe in you." We have no reason to look up to Zeus, to admire him. We don't regard him as a model for behaviour. We don't expect him to behave well. So his bad behaviour doesn't present us with any kind of moral dilemma or any kind of crisis of faith. Interestingly though, it did have that kind of effect on some of the Greeks, particularly during the classical period. More educated people, the philosophers among them, were actually moved towards atheism, at least with respect to Zeus and his pantheon. They didn't believe that the behaviour of these gods, and at this point they acquire these quotation marks, were worthy of the epithet divine. Some became virtually atheists, in the sense that we use that word today. They rejected any notion of the divine at all. Others pushed the concept of the divine out of the world into some kind of distant realm that had no relationship to our world. Others developed a less anthropomorphic, a more transcendental, more ethically pure concept of the divine. Interestingly, they had a concept of how a being worthy of being called divine ought to behave, and Zeus didn't match up with this ideal. We might reasonably wonder where this view came from, this higher kind of morality, these moral standards by which even the gods themselves were judged. So, seeing Zeus destroy and punish people or have his way with people doesn't particularly bother us. We're not in any way invested in these gods. They're just myths. So why, then, do people, especially atheists, become so upset when they read in the Bible of this God Yahweh, one among many of his names, performing acts that similarly seem to be below what we would expect of a divine being? I'm sure the Greek philosophers would see Yahweh as just another pretend god, not truly representative of genuine divinity, these standards that they hold to. Now, of course, Christians also struggle with these depictions of God. Some of them do, at least. A hell of a lot of YouTube video time is taken up by non-believers on the one hand, pointing out all the heinous acts that this God of the Old Testament has commanded or carried out, and on the other hand, believers seeking to justify these acts. Funnily enough, I don't see any similar videos about Zeus. Note that these particular Christians don't choose to go down the path of Plato, Aristotle and others. They don't adopt a more philosophical approach. They don't appeal to some kind of higher standard. No, they stand and defend and justify God as he appears in the Old Testament. And of course, atheists aren't out there attacking the behaviour of Zeus either. In fact, believers and non-believers would probably happily stand side by side and agree that Zeus's behaviour was frequently reprehensible. So why the difference? Why is there so much emotional investment on both sides of the battle with respect to the biblical God, while there's no such investment at all when it comes to Zeus? I think if there was today a powerful group out there proclaiming Zeus as the Lord of the gods, and that we should worship him and obey him in all things, and that he provides the model by which we should live, well, I think then that the rest of us, Christians included, would become rather concerned. We would think that this was not a good idea. When I read the Bible, and when I come across the terrible things that God does there, particularly in the Old Testament, but also sometimes in the New Testament, the book of Revelation, for instance, I don't get particularly upset. I don't have any kind of visceral reaction to this. It's just another mythology. I get no more upset or worked up about these stories than I do about similar stories of Zeus or Odin or Shiva. It doesn't even bother me that other people choose to worship this God. I'm sure there are many Christians who are able to read these stories exactly the way I read them. They represent a distorted view of God and the divine, a view that people once held. But this is a primitive and perverted view of the divine. They find their God in other parts of the Bible and the biblical tradition. Their reaction is a bit like the Greek philosophers' reaction to the popular view of the gods in their day. These are distortions of the divine, not a real representation of the divine. If these Christians pick and choose among the Bible stories, keeping the bits they like and rejecting the bits they don't, I'm fine with that. I think that's the way it should be. Just like the Greek philosophers before them, they have an idea in mind of what divinity means. And again, you could ask, where does this come from? And they reject elements within the Bible and within the Christian tradition that they believe are in contradiction with this. Excellent. Keep up the good work. The problem really only arises, and this is what stirs up the passions of non-believers, I think. It only arises when other people, who also happen to call themselves Christians, seek to defend and justify these reprehensible expressions of the divine. They want to say that it's fine that Zeus turned himself into a cloud to seduce Io, or that he chained Prometheus to a rock and ordered an eagle to peck out his liver every night, only to have it grow back again the next day and repeat the cycle forever. Oh, whoops, I forgot. We don't believe in Zeus, do we?